You are now connected to Evoking Involvement with our international team. Danny is in California, USA.
Vladdy is in Spain, Europa.
Through core discussions, interviews, and relating our own personal life awareness,
we really hope to make your life journey a bit more peaceful, allowing our podcast to educate, evoke, and entertain. And today's guest, who happens to live in London, has been a champion for human rights, especially with a heavy prominence on the LGBTQ plus and HIV communities. And I love this. His mantra has been, and this is a quote, "I'm HIV and proud of it." Yes, and we are proud and honored to have this major key player here with us at Evo, Matthew Hodson.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Hi, Matthew. Well, Matthew, Mary Gabriel, who wrote the quintessential Madonna biography about life, stated in her tome, Matthew Hodson is one of the most influential gay activists in Britain. How do you feel about that?
I mean, as a lifelong Madonna fan, I mean, that was probably the best compliment I've ever received. I wish that I thought that Madonna had read the book, but I suspect she got her assistant to look at it for her, and so she probably remains happily unaware of my existence. But I will just pretend that Madonna scoured every page and looked up all the references. But yeah, that was really nice. That was really cool.
I understand that you attended the University of Leeds, and I think it was late 90s, like 1999 or so. You joined Gay Men Fighting AIDS, a community-based sexual health charity, and eventually rising to the role of chief executive. Was that similar to our Act Up with, I think Larry Kramer started that?
It wasn't quite ACT UP, although actually I was also involved in ACT UP and in Outrage, which is a gay rights direct action group. Gay Men Fighting AIDS was perhaps a little bit more like GMHC, which was also Larry Kramer, Gay Men's Health Crisis. It was definitely kind of volunteer and activist-led organization. And at one point it was very explicitly, it was just for gay and bisexual men. I think that was kind of coming from a very different time to where we are now, where actually we're much more about the broader, more diverse communities, the LGBTQIA plus communities, plus allies as well. And I think allies are incredibly important. But at that point, when homosexuality was still bearing the burden of a lot more inequality in law in the UK, including unequal age of consent, we weren't allowed to marry, we weren't allowed to adopt, we weren't allowed to give blood, we weren't allowed, all of these different restrictions which were placed on gay and bisexual men, and some of them also upon lesbians as well. Then actually it felt really empowering to say we are a group of gay men, we're unashamed of being a group of gay men, and the most important voice in reaching gay men and talking to gay men about safer sex, about HIV prevention, is the voice of gay men.
You became executive director for 8 years of a wonderful organization called AIDSmap, MAP, a community-based charity which supports people living with HIV globally by providing accurate and up-to-date information about HIV and AIDS.
Can I go back a bit? I guess I'll just go back a little bit to my time with Gay Men Fighting AIDS. So when I joined Gay Men Fighting AIDS, the number of gay and bisexual men who were acquiring HIV was much higher than any other risk group within the UK. I joined that organisation. I had recently been diagnosed myself, and I wanted to try and support other gay men in what we knew was effective HIV prevention at the time, which still, at that point, was mainly condoms or abstinence, or choosing what kind of sex you're going to have. And then we were very instrumental at Gay Men Fighting AIDS was really going deep into the research, and we were looking at a lot of the medical research which we were getting from AIDSmap, and that of course was telling us about this amazing thing that actually HIV treatment, if you were HIV negative and you took some of the HIV treatment, it could prevent infection, what we now call PrEP. which is now huge. But I was there kind of right at the very beginning where they were starting to do these trials and go, this could be a game changer. And then also we were looking at the impact of viral load on transmission risk and discovering that if someone had a very low viral load, often people, or generally, if they acquire HIV, they have a high viral load kind of around the time that they've acquired it. Then it dips and it stays low until they get ill if they're untreated. But if they're treated, their viral load is pushed even further down until it becomes undetectable. We all know the mantra by now, I hope, that undetectable means untransmittable. But of course, back then, before we had that very definitive scientific basis for it, we did know that viral load was having a big impact on transmission risk. And one of the things that Gay Men Fighting AIDS did was we talked about all of this. We said it's not just about condoms, it's about preventing HIV transmission. And it doesn't really matter how we prevent HIV transmission. The important thing is we prevent HIV transmission. And that was very controversial at the time, because at the time everyone was still saying, just use a condom. There can only be one message, use the condom every time. And we went, well, it's great, you can say that as much as you like. But actually, some people aren't going to, for whatever reason. And you may disagree with their reasoning, but that isn't enough to change their behavior. So what we are trying to do is try to ensure that everyone could have the best sex with the least possible harm. That worked. I mean, that was the amazing thing, is that kind of from 2013, gay and bisexual men in the UK, the number of new infections amongst that group started to drop quite dramatically. And that was even before we had PrEP. I mean, this was when people were starting to be a bit more treated and we were starting to see the impact of U equals U, even though we hadn't yet named it. And then, of course, PrEP came along and we started to talk about that and started to advocate for that because the health services in the UK were very slow to take it up. And really became this incredibly exciting snowballing effect, because also people who were wanting to access PrEP were getting tested for HIV, and then if they were HIV positive, they'd be put on treatment and they would cease to be a transmission risk. And so it got really good. And I got to a point where it's just like, I don't really feel that gay men in the UK is where the big challenge is now. It's not that it was sorted, but we're getting to a good place. But of course, the more that we learned about U equals U, the more it incensed me that there are people in the world who did not have access to treatment, and that was perpetuating the epidemic. So when AIDSmap actually approached me and said, would you be interested in this role? And actually I was thinking about it, and I had a whole table full of post-it notes with pros and cons on it. But I actually thought, you know what, if I'd set out what my mission was when I joined Gay Men Fighting AIDS, that goal was achieved. But there are bigger challenges now for the whole communities of people who live with HIV all around the world. And AIDSmap is where I can perhaps have some impact there. That was the difference between Gay Men Fighting AIDS and AIDSmap for me. And that was kind of what I set out to do at AIDSmap.
You talk about like all those empowering things. So what it was, if you could just sum up your success points you've achieved in that mission?
AIDSmap's early advocacy for U equals U was really important. I mean, we weren't the very first organisation to endorse it, but we were the first kind of like properly, heavily scientific organisation to endorse it. And I think that carried a very special weight with organisations, with government organisations, with charities, with not-for-profit organisations around the world. When we said the science here is good, the science is important, the science adds up, I think that helped really kind of move the dial on that. And I guess I could claim, that we've had that much impact in terms of treatment access, which of course is incredibly important still. But I do think that once we start acknowledging that treating people isn't just moral absolute certainty for preventing death, but it's also the key part for any successful prevention program. It's the weight of those two, plus the glorious impact it can have on challenging HIV stigma. The work that AIDSmap did around U equals U, for me, I guess that's the most important kind of globally changing, world-changing thing. And that's something I'm kind of incredibly proud to have been involved in.
Well, now I'd like to stroke you just a little bit more. This man has impacted many lives with his activism. He's received many accolades and awards for his valor. And just as recent as 2021 became the first openly HIV positive person to co-chair the European AIDS Conference in 2021, an international medical AIDS conference. Kudos. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was extraordinary. I was asked to do it, and I completely unqualified because I'm not a scientist by any means. I mean, AIDSmap employs really strong people with very strong scientific knowledge who can interpret research and results. I'm not that person. I can do spreadsheets and I can organize people and do. I have other skills, but science isn't it. And then I got asked to be the co-chair. And I kind of say, well, yeah, I feel like it's just important. Actually, there is someone who's living openly with HIV in a prominent role. Nothing about us without us. You know, it's a really important principle. It wasn't actually a kind of like a deliberate thing, but we can looked into it and said, well, has this ever actually happened before? And I'm still waiting for someone to raise their hand and say, oh, actually, no, back in 1992, I was an openly HIV-positive person co-chairing a conference or something like that. Just unaware that it had ever happened before. But what is really fantastic is that it's happened several times since. And the European AIDS Clinical Society, they've now kind of said, yeah, we think this is going to be the way it is from now on. That every time we put on a conference, we will make sure that we have, someone representing the scientific and medical community, but also someone representing the communities of people who live with HIV, chairing the conference. And I think that's fantastic. That's how it should be.
You broke the ice.
I did. I'm a game changer.
Good job, Matthew. And well, the impact of all this activism is evident and clear. So you impacted lots of lives. How has it impacted you? What do you think? How did it shape your personality?
Nothing is kind of all in one direction. So I will say, here's a really great thing. When I chose to be completely open about my HIV status, and that's like not just open as in like kind of with friends, but that was like, I will appear on the television, I will wear badges in public, I will be in newspapers and all of that, and just be absolutely shameless, brazen about my HIV status. I was really scared, to be honest. I'll tell you how it happened. I was asked to write an article. I wrote an article for a magazine, and I just decided it's time for me to be open about my HIV status. And so I wrote this article, and I can't talk about the importance of challenging stigma and the importance of being open, the impact that can have on challenging stigma without being open myself. So I'm living with HIV. I've been living with HIV. I think at that point I'd been living with HIV for 14 years, and pressed send, and then went, oh my God. Because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But then when it came out, everyone was like kind of nice about it. It was a bit weird because like it came out in the national press before I told some of my friends, and so some of my friends kind of read about it in the press first and then kind of went, oh, why don't you tell me? Some awkward conversations. The more I became out, the more I talked about it on a regular basis, the more I kind of inserted it sneakily into conversations when I first met someone, not in a kind of like big revelation way, but just like slide it in so that it was just part of what they knew about me right at the start, the more liberated I felt. And I do absolutely recognize that being open about your HIV status isn't something that's going to be easy for everyone. Some people are in vulnerable places where, we know that it can have an impact on intimate partner violence and things like that. I'm not saying everyone needs to come out, but I'm saying that for those who can, for those who enjoy a certain level of privilege, which makes it easy for them, and I am one of those people, oh my God, it's just amazing. Because I realized how much my own internalized my self-stigma was holding me back, and now that it's not there to hold me back anymore, I feel so much better. But I did say it's a pendulum. It does go in both ways. The one thing I actually do find challenging is HIV. I've got 101 problems. HIV isn't one of them, really. But that sometimes has been a challenge because in the last couple of years, I've had some health issues. And they're not HIV related, but I kind of felt this pressure that I needed, because I was that kind of quite fit older guy with HIV who was very kind of self-assured and blatant about it all. But then when I kind of got ill, I felt like, oh, that's not who I am publicly. And I was kind of, to be honest, I felt kind of quite a sense of shame about the fact that my body was suddenly weak, that I wasn't able to do all the things that I used to be able to do. It was personal as well, so it wasn't like I was, I'm not sure that I want to share this information, but at the same time, because I was still sharing the photos of me when I was able to work out, and people were like, oh wow, you're so fit, and they were like, I was like, you don't know that what I'm not sharing is the images of me just unable to move, which was happening on some days. So I think there's that little bit double-edged sword going on there, that by putting myself forward as this kind of exemplar of good health while living with HIV, I kind of created a trap for myself that then it was very difficult to admit when I wasn't doing well.
I would kind of feel that way too. Like, here I am, sort of this poster boy, and all of a sudden my body isn't doing what it's supposed to do, and maybe even some guilt in there, shame, guilt, whatever, trying to keep that public persona.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a challenge, isn't it? Social media is fun. It's a lot of fun. I know that it's really helped me to reach people all around the world, and I've kind of got messages from people in Nigeria and Uganda and the Philippines and Vietnam and Cambodia and Australia and America and everything, and it's like, wow, this is incredible. I can reach people everywhere, but at the same time, and this is true of all people who use social media, it only is giving a little piece of information about you. It's the tip of the iceberg thing, and then people make up the rest, and so they think they see all of you, but actually they're seeing a very curated view. And I think that's even more so for kind of some of the Insta people who, kind of is very much about the image. At least I do kind of try and show a bit of vulnerability and a little bit of humor. I'm not saying that they don't as well, but I think it's difficult because I think we've all become our avatars to a certain extent. And how do we cope as a society when actually everyone is perhaps not lying, but concealing elements of themselves, and that's what we then know about each other? It's all it's like the Matrix, as it were. We're not actually living in the reality that is presented towards us.
A good point. I want to get this out because I think it sums up a good portion of who you are, and it zeroes in on who Matthew Hodson is. And this is a quote: HIV is just a virus, not a moral judgment. I'm proud of what I'm getting chills. I'm proud of what I've achieved in the years since acquiring HIV, and that includes providing encouragement and support to others who are dealing with their diagnosis. I hope that I have had some impact challenging stigma. I hope that I've been a part of a movement of people who countered the idea that HIV is shit. HIV doesn't define me, and it doesn't limit me either.
Wow.
Science.
Matthew, from the time we first contacted you several months ago, you took some sabbatical first to Sri Lanka, then Japan, and you told us for healing and reflection. Would you like to share it? How was it? How was that experience?
I went to Sri Lanka partly because my grandfather was born there. His father was a vicar in Sri Lanka. When he was a child, he was sent back on a ship back to England. I mean, there would be no commercial passenger flights at the time that he was sent back, so it would have been a long voyage for a very young child. And he never saw his parents again. His parents sent him back and remained in Sri Lanka. He was then fostered by another family, and he and his siblings were raised by this other family. We discovered the probable reason for this kind of separation was that his mother was mixed race of Sri Lankan heritage. I think that at the time this happened, which would have been the beginning of the 20th century, it would have been a scandalous thing for a mixed race woman to be the wife of a vicar in England, fine for them in Sri Lanka. So there was kind of quite a complex kind of family dynamic going on there. I think he quite challenging relationship with his own family, with my mother. But the other reason he might have had a challenging relationship with my mother is that he had really wanted to have a boy. And we now think that perhaps the reason he had really wanted to have a boy was that he was actually gay. And my grandmother was also gay, and that they had married as a marriage of convenience, but also to have an heir. Obviously, homosexuality was illegal at the time in England, and so kind of marriages of convenience were not that unusual. Now, we don't have like kind of very good evidence for this. It was my mother's belief. I guess when I look at what evidence we do have, none of it says this is true. They wouldn't need documentation about this or anything like that. They certainly would never have spoken about it. But on the other hand, you kind of go, well, this is what it would have looked like. As I say, there's this kind of complex thing going on there about my family. So I wanted to go to Sri Lanka and just sort of see how it felt to be there. And I went to the church where my great-grandfather had been the vicar, and of course his name was kind of up on the wall, and there was actually a window which was dedicated to him, and then there was another window which was dedicated to two of my great aunts who were pulled out to sea and drowned. The tides are very strong around that area of Sri Lanka. In Gaul, which was the town where he was born and where my great-grandfather was the vicar, there's these amazing trees, and they've clearly been there for hundreds of years. They're huge. And my mother had travelled to Sri Lanka at the end of her life, and so I knew that she had stood there as well. And as I had been very ill, I was kind of very conscious of, where am I in the family tree, and kind of recognising that I'm at the end of it. There's no one following me, but to just stand under that tree and kind of think about the generations of my family and of my ancestors who had been in that very same spot was actually just profoundly moving, and it kind of helped me to kind of gain some perspective on where I was with my life and where I wanted to go with my life and what things I still wanted to achieve. I did also do a week retreat, so that was just kind of 7 hours of breath work and meditation and yoga, which for someone who is neither spiritual nor bendy, this was quite a challenge for me, but it got real clarity about my life from that experience. I'm incredibly grateful that I had the opportunity to do that.
Was it the silence retreat, Matthew, or
Oh God, no! You can't imagine me in a silent retreat.
Like the next level could be. So what, Matthew, maybe the answer will be not that brief, or just maybe you don't have the answer, but what do you see, or what you expect different now from that experience?
So kind of meditation has now become part of my daily routine. I try every morning to get up, and before I look at anything electronic, I sit down and I usually kind of listen to kind of a guided meditation. I find that easier to still my scattered mind. And I feel like that has given me a lot of perspective. I mean, there's been struggles. I mean, as I mentioned, there's been health struggles, and that kind of the challenge of working out who I am if I don't have the same level of energy which I had, and and realizing that perhaps I can't do all the things that I used to do, and it's like that does strike to kind of very fundamental issues about identity and about self-worth and value, as well as about work and kind of what you can actually achieve or what you can aspire to do still with your life. I find that taking that time for reflection every day has changed my life, to be honest. So I'm still trying to do that. I'm trying to be disciplined about kind of writing in my journal, about practicing gratitude, thinking of things that I'm grateful for every day, writing it down to make sure that I'm kind of really kind of on it. I guess I'll tell you what the thing which has really shifted is when I got ill, there was a point where, I don't want to go into the details of everything that happened, but there was a point where my doctor said to me, I thought you were dying. I thought you were going to die. I realized how much I was really transgressive with my own healthcare providers, despite the fact that I can try and work in empowering people, particularly people with HIV, in their interactions with healthcare providers. I kind of felt like the rules didn't apply to me. Not that I was stronger or better, but just felt that I had a mission which was more important than my own health. Actually, I kind of articulated it even, kind of, I'd rather die than stop working. And I think going on that retreat turned that around for me. It said, actually, it's okay to value your health. It's okay to prioritize yourself. That understanding that the work doesn't need me. I mean, there's really important work to be done, and I hope that I played a part in it. I really want to have done. But it's also okay for me to say, it's not for me right now. There are other wonderful, incredible, powerful activists out there, and they will do the work. They don't need me. Whatever I can contribute, I can contribute, but I don't need to feel that sense of responsibility, that sense of being willing to die for it.
And without you, meaning without your health, you can't work. So realizing that self-care and self-reflection is so important is not only, I'm getting chills again, is not only important for you, but it's important for us and those that you impact and you work with.
I'll tell you something. So when I was diagnosed when I was 30. The doctor said, don't panic, we've got treatment, you should live for about another 20 years. That's what they said back then, because treatment was brand new. So we knew that it was effective. We knew that it would keep AIDS at bay, but we didn't know how long. And it was much more toxic back then. We hadn't got the dosing right, all of those things. So I was given 20 years to live. Now, that's a luxury compared to what other people experienced, or people in the pre-treatment era. So I'm going to completely acknowledge that. But at the age of 30, I thought, 20 years. Takes me up to a nice round 50. And 50, it's half a century, makes a girl think, all of that. But I kind of was determined that I was going to make a really good use of those 20 years, and I wanted to do things which were going to make the world a better place, help people, support people. I wanted to kind of be on my deathbed and kind of go, I did a good thing. I did some good things. And I guess when I got to 50, it was incredibly moving emotionally for me personally, because I hadn't expected to live that long. And also I felt like I've still got gas in the tank. I can still go on further. So I guess there was that thing. Maybe what I kind of learned in Sri Lanka was you were willing to do all of that from the ages of 30 to 50. Give yourself a break. You're 56 now. It's all right. But, thank you. But I will say this. I can't stop being an activist for HIV and for the communities of people who live with HIV. I mean, it's a stupid joke to make, but it's in my blood.
Good.
Wow.
Let's bring everybody up to date. As we speak, you are no longer the executive director of AIDSmap. So my question would be, did the sabbatical to Sri Lanka and Japan, taking time away from the position, did that help create the decision to step down?
Yeah, I decided to step down actually while I was on the retreat in Sri Lanka. I didn't write anything, didn't write my resignation at that point. I felt I needed to have the time to let that thought percolate, to make sure it wasn't just a kind of, like a sombrero or stuffed donkey that you bring back from holiday thinking it's wonderful at the time, and then you realize it does not go in your house at all when you get home. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a holiday fantasy. But when I got back to England after Sri Lanka, with this idea that it was time for me to move on, and that I could actually think of some incredible activists who I thought would just be wonderful in the post. And it's like, I've been there for 7.5, almost 8 years. I felt like one of the things I was learning was how to let go, and I felt it was time for me to let go of it. And I'm still, genuinely, I'm really excited about the possibilities that are opening up for me now, because I've been a part of an organisation, all of my HIV work since 1999 when I first joined Gay Men Fighting AIDS has been as part of an organisation. But I think there's also been a part of what I've been doing, which has just been me personally. I mean, the kind of nonsense which I post on Twitter and all of that, I mean, that's just me. No one's telling me to do it, and no one's checking my work before I post it either. And I kind of thought it would just be kind of fun just to be able to do what feels right for me always, just for a bit even. It remains to be seen what direction my career and life will take. I'm not entirely well yet, and I know that has put limitations on me and upon the amount of time I can spend working, that I can need to respect, and I need to listen to my body. But I will continue to talk about HIV. I will continue to challenge stigma at every opportunity. I will continue to try and break down some of those prejudices and myths and misinformation that blight the lives of people who live with HIV, because we need to do it. It needs to happen. We need to just get to the point where no one thinks that people living with HIV are somehow lesser than, because I just don't think I am. I don't think any of us are.
Speaking
Wow.
of being activists, what initially was the event or motivation that propelled you into being an activist?
I was at university. So in the United Kingdom, I guess I kind of properly came out as gay when I was at university, which is kind of quite typical for back then, because at that time, 75% of people in the UK thought homosexuality was always wrong. 75%. And the gay scene, there was a lot of activism on the gay scene, but there was also a lot of people who were kind of quite happy with a kind of, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone kind of thing. We had our gay bars. They none of them had windows which were open to the street. They were all boarded up or blacked up, so people couldn't see in or out. It made people think that we're getting up to all sorts of really exciting stuff. In fact, we're just sitting there drinking our beer like anyone else. It's probably a big disappointment, but it was a big disappointment for me when I realised that we weren't doing all the dirty things which I hoped we were doing. That was kind of my kind of coming out, and then the government at the time politicized homosexuality. Obviously, AIDS was kind of starting at that point, was really starting to have an impact in the UK. And that obviously led lots of people to feel really scared about homosexuality and about disease. And this whole narrative, this very much more dominantly homophobic narrative came into being. And it was absolutely, the government started this culture war about it. And they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to ban the promotion of homosexuality, because it's children. The Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, at the time said, children are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. Now, that was nonsense, because children weren't being taught anything about homosexuality before Section 28 either. But there was this just idea that someone might see something about homosexuality and not be told that they were morally repugnant. There was an amendment to the Local Government Act. It was called Section 28, which banned the promotion of homosexuality. It had a terrible impact on teachers and on the students who they taught, because obviously they felt they were absolutely forbidden from making any reference to homosexuality at all. They were completely constrained. But it also had this kind of positive impact, which is that people who previously had not been politically engaged became politically engaged. And you can see that from the numbers who attended gay events. There was a march in Manchester in February 1988. So this was me in my second year at university. There were 20,000 people on it. Now that was, at the time, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest collection of gay rights activists who had ever been seen in Europe, and probably the world at that point. And when I first went on Gay Pride in London in 1986, there were 6,000 people. But after that march in Manchester, there were 20,000 people. And then the next day there were 30,000 people. And then there were 50,000 people. And then, just last weekend, we had like 1.5 million people on the streets of London to celebrate Gay Pride. So I came out as a result of Section 28, as a result of this homophobic piece of legislation, because this homophobic piece of legislation was going through, coming onto the statute books, and I said, I can't be silent about my sexuality. I am being punished by the government, and if I remain silent, that says it's okay. So I need to nail my colours to the mast. So I ran up the gay flag and started waving it. That's how I first got involved in activism. I was kind of radical back then as well.
Wow, such an inspiring story. By the way, we are celebrating Gay Pride Parade here in Madrid. It's the whole week, a little bit more days. So,
I wish I could be there with you, and the sunshine as well. Sunshine, all those beautiful Spanish men.
You are welcome. Here we'll be waiting for you. Matthew, thank you for such an inspiring story. I would like to take that, like other parts of your personality, maybe of your history. And you're also a performer. In the early days, you studied acting.
Yes, yeah.
Do you miss it?
I do. Oh gosh, if anyone is listening to this and they want to offer me any acting work, just get in touch, because I miss it so badly. I trained as an actor. I was in a show which is the longest running show in kind of modern theatre called The Mousetrap in the West End. I won't say anything more about it. It's a show. I was a founder member of a kind of gay theatre company called Homo Promos. That was way back in 1991. And they're still going. And I actually did some work with them during lockdown and did a few kind of rehearsed readings. To be honest, I think when I trained as an actor, I don't know how good I was. It felt to me like I was really interested in acting because I wasn't sure how much I liked myself. And so the idea of putting on a mask, becoming a different person was very comfortable for me. And I think a lot of gay people of my generation kind of felt that same way. And I think that's one of the reasons why perhaps kind of gay men gravitated towards the theatre, was that we were used to putting on masks, and perhaps to a certain extent we were more comfortable putting on masks. And then so I kind of acted for a bit, and actually the reason I stopped acting then was when I got diagnosed with HIV. And as I said, I had kind of felt I've got to make the most of my next 20 years, and I don't want my next 20 years to be waiting around for auditions, comparing myself to other actors, feeling depressed, feeling unable to go on holiday in case Steven Spielberg suddenly calls. Why would he call? All of that. And so I decided to just knock it on the head. But then in 2016, I did like 6 shows in a row. I mean, just in kind of fringe theatres. I was asked to do something, and I did one, and I got some really great reviews, and it really did a lot for my ego. And then I did another one, and 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 it was so much fun. And most of the roles I played were gay men, and that was so much fun because I was like, oh, like, you don't have to kind of go, oh, how do I play heterosexual? I need to butcher it up a bit or whatever. You just act, you just be. But also I think I liked myself more, and so I was happy to incorporate more of myself into it. And I felt I gave stronger performances as a result. It was a great experience.
Since we are in the past, I want to stay in the past a little bit. I'm going to put several photographs up on the screen
Lord.
in your early years. Please tell us what comes to mind when you see these pictures of yourself. Okay, here's the first one. Sorry. Here it is.
Oh, look at that sweet little boy.
I love this photograph.
Okay, that was taken by a friend of mine's mother. I can't remember the mother's name. I think her name may have been Amanda or something like that. Amanda King. The friend was called Jessica King. That photo was actually taken for Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was producing a movie called Young Sherlock, and I went up for it, and I gave a terrible audition and didn't get the part. But that was the photo. That's where that photo came from. Was me. That was the photo I used to audition for Young Sherlock. I was 17. I was dating a girl at the time. I had sex with a man by that point. But homosexuality, the age of consent for gay men was 21 in the UK back then. So I was very illegal.
I don't know why, but when I first looked at this, something screamed to me, Oscar Wilde. Not that it looks like Oscar Wilde, but I don't know, the pose, the days, the sophistication, the class. I don't know. It just screamed to me, Oscar Wilde, and I mean that in a very complimentary way.
I'll take that. No, thank you.
Here's the second photograph.
Okay. That's obviously a headshot from the days when I was like really earning my living from acting, or trying to. That one I used to call it my Bambi shot, because I don't really feel it reflected my personality at the time at all. I just had that kind of wide-eyed look, and sometimes I would see a script or see the kind of cast breakdown for something, and if it said kind of sweet innocent boy, I would be like an often rather passive object of somebody else's affection. And that would be the photo I would send for that one, because that's what he looks like.
It's definitely a headshot. Yep.
It definitely, I would say that was never my personality. That photo does not reflect my personality ever, then nor now. But it was something I could play.
Here's the last one.
Okay. Well, so that was taken when I was 20. I think it was just before my 21st birthday. Now, that was taken by a rather terrible artist, and I'm not going to name him. but he was very popular with homosexual gentlemen, and he would get young boys and photograph them, and then do his rather terrible watercolors based on them. He was not above using one person's head and another person's body, if that's what kind of met his artistic inspiration at the time. I don't know how many paintings of his I actually did eventually appear in, but I do know that at least one of them was definitely my head on somebody else's body. The other person's body was much nicer than mine, so I was quite grateful for it at the time. There's a story behind that photo. There's an additional story behind that photo. I think it illustrates that often when we look at images from our youth, we see different things to what other people see. Because I would look at that photo and I go, clearly I was cute, and you can't deny it. I think I was cute back then. But like about a month before that happened, I had broken up with a long-term partner, and that breakup was violent. He had all sorts of issues, and I'm still vaguely in touch with him, and I still care for him, but he beat me up quite badly. And when I look at that photo, what I see is the remains of a black eye, which I had at the time. That's what I see. Yeah.
Wow, what a story! Thank you for sharing that. Is it David Hockney?
Oh God, I wish it were David Hockney. No. If it was David Hockney, everyone would know that I had posted David Hockney if I'd ever posted David Hockney. I was with an agency which did kind of peddle young, cute guys out to pose for various people. And I did work with one artist who I have a lot of respect for. I'm not going to name them, but there's an artist who is quite famous, very accomplished. I've never seen any evidence that he ever utilized me in any of his work. I must have done about 10 sessions with him, so it's a little bit sad if I haven't been immortalized like Dot from Sunday in the Park with George. But yeah, I worked with a good artist. I worked with Derek Jarman. That wasn't a modeling job, that was an acting job, but he was a queer filmmaker, artist, and activist, and gardener. He died of AIDS. He was open about living with AIDS when he did, and at a time when to be open about AIDS or HIV as a public figure was an extraordinary courage. I was fortunate enough to know him, and I am very, very briefly in the background of his film of Edward II. And that is an association which I really cherish, because he is someone who is one of my absolute icons. And the fact that I actually got to know him, that I had lunch with him on several occasions, and that I am a part of one of his pieces of work is, just an enormous privilege.
Matthew, what year would that have been?
So Edward II was 1991. I'm just in the background, but someone the other day on X, Twitter, said, oh, I just was browsing eBay type site, and they found, I think it was like a kind of, they used to have cards in cinemas. It wasn't the poster, but they would have like kind of images in the lobby of cinemas. And an Italian lobby card for Edward II had a big picture of Tilda Swinton, who was in Edward II. This was before she became Oscar-winning actress Tilda Swinton, when she was still obscure indie actress Tilda Swinton. And another picture of Stephen Waddington, who played Edward II. And right in the centre of the picture of Stephen Waddington, because he's addressing a crowd, but right in the centre is me, and I am literally at the heart of the photo, beautifully lit. I am absolutely devouring the camera. And I had never seen this image before, and I was so chuffed to see it.
I want to see a picture of that.
It would be great.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
It's on my Insta, so if people want to follow me on Insta, they can see it there.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Well, Matthew, you are like a brilliant. You have so many lights. So if you're just looking at you from different perspectives, Matthew, what do you like most about yourself?
Oh God.
Well, if it's a long list, it's okay. You can start from the beginning and then add whatever you want.
I mean, I studied philosophy. I feel like I'm ambivalent about everything, and including myself. Every time I think about something I like about myself, I think about something I dislike about myself. I give you this stupid answer. My hair's awesome. And it always has been. So that's what's one thing I like about myself. No, seriously, I'm fearless. I just don't feel fear. What's the point? It only holds you back. Live life shamelessly. I like that about myself.
Oh, good point. Good point. Now we're going to throw out just some frivolous, fun questions to you to get to know you a little bit better. Number one, name one of your favorite films of all time.
Cabaret.
Oh
my God, that film is perfection. If anyone is listening to this and they haven't seen it, don't dismiss it. I don't care if you don't like musicals. Don't dismiss it. Every song is part of a nightclub act, so you don't have to worry about people suddenly spontaneously bursting into song. It is the best film about the rise of Nazism, I think, that there is. Liza Minnelli, it's nothing like the character in the book, but oh my God, it's such a compelling character as she performs it brilliantly. Michael York is fantastic. The direction, the choreography, the lighting, everything. There's just not a dull moment in the whole film. And it has a sequence at the center of the film where you see how easy it is to find fascism appealing, which is just chilling. So, yeah, it's my favorite film.
Vladdy, you've seen it, right, Vladdy?
Yeah. And I sing it in karaoke, you know, the cabaret song.
Which song do you sing?
We're good at sitting.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a must-have karaoke song. But actually, yeah, I love that movie as well. Matthew,
I just do all the dance moves to Goodbye My Lieber Hair. I mean, because it's like that's within my range.
Well, and Matthew, what's the title of your memoir?
Oh, Lucky Bugger.
Lucky Bugger. I love it. I love it. Name the first name of the guy you ever kissed.
John. He was. I was 15. I went to a gay nightclub called Heaven, which is still going. And I picked up a photographer who was over from America, and his name was John. And he took me back to his very swanky hotel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, name one of the best choices you've ever made in your life.
I would say that when I've chosen bravely, those are the best choices. It was a really great choice to join Gay Men Fighting AIDS. It was a really great choice to join AIDSmap. I think it's going to be a really great choice to have become independent. Those are 3 really good choices I've made. Choosing to be open about my sexuality, choosing to be open about my HIV status. I think just choosing to be honest about who you really are. I think that's the lesson that I would always say to young people. When you're honest about who you are, the world opens up for you.
Authentic.
Yeah.
When you get into bed at night, are you a guy who wears pajamas, a nightshirt, boxers, or nothing at all?
Who wears clothes in bed? What a disgusting idea.
I agree with you. Thanks God, the first person.
Oh, okay. What is your favorite physical attribute above the waist?
Oh, that's gonna be much harder then. Well, I've already said my hair is awesome, so I guess that's the one I'll go for.
Okay, now what is your favorite physical attribute below the waist?
Well, obviously that is my very impressive penis.
Thank you. It's a correct answer. Thank you. Thank you.
I can't believe I just said that.
Well, some specific maybe. Name one word or short phrase to describe Matthew Hodson.
Oh, shameless.
Kudos to this brilliant and lovely man for joining us today. And thank you to everyone out there who has joined us on another episode of Evo. And please do comment on our episodes. We read them. We want to learn from you also. We love to hear your feedback. So please check back often, and because we have more guests coming up.
And please subscribe so you can be notified of our episodes and get full updates. And also be sure and like our channel as well.
Adios.
Ciao.
From California, Spain, and Matthew in England. Yes.